Ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you just want to celebrate because you just finished the first unit. Yeah! Give yourself a round of applause. Even if it looks silly, that's fine. We are moving on to the next unit. This is Prep 7. This is all about how to organize your speech. Now, hopefully you'll see that pretty much every unit builds off of each other. So the lessons that we learned in Unit 1, including windows and mirrors, different types of supports, icing, and pricing will be used in the second unit. However, we are going to add a little bit more to our repertoire of ideas. You really want to impress someone, use big words like repertoire and say it right. I always want to be like, repertoire, but that's not right. All right, so I'm going to take you through step by step what we're going to be doing so you can better prepare and understand kind of what to expect. So the first step, we're going to be talking about organizing, specifically using a topical organizational pattern. And so you'll use one of these patterns based on what you think is going to be best and who your audience is. The next step is we're going to talk about outlining, and specifically how do we really, build off our understanding of outlining from the first speech, but add another main point to it. Then we've got audience analysis. You're actually going to be speaking to your audience, right? Well, you'll be speaking to college students or your peers, but you're actually going to create a fictional audience, and we're going to pretend to be that audience. That always confuses people, but we'll get there, don't worry. Then you're going to learn how to create real visual aids, unlike the ones you see every day via PowerPoint, using Haiku Deck. And then finally, we'll talk about opening, transitioning, and closing. All right, so if you want to take a look at the Hit Your Targets page, specifically Speech 2, you can see now we're going to 6 credible sources. You can have 15 slides instead of 1 slide, and now you have 5 to 7 minutes. So you're going to speak longer, you're going to have more slides, but you're going to have less note cards. You're only allowed 2 note cards. All right, so let's talk about question 1, topical organization. Well, when you think about topical organization, what comes to mind? Exactly. Suntan lotion, right? That's what came to mind, right? No, actually that's not the case. When you think of topical, it's like a topical cream or something. No, instead I want you to be thinking about pizza pie. That's a pizza pie. Okay, that's my best Italian accent. Stereotypical Italian accent. I would not eat the toppings on this pizza, just so you know. Every great pizza should have 2 things, cheese and pepperoni, and that's it. All right, why do I want you to think about a pizza when we talk about topical organization? Because if you think about it, an entire pizza would be way too much information. Have you ever tried eating an entire pizza like on your own? Not like the personal pan pizza from Pizza Hut, which are great, by the way. I'm talking like a large pizza from like Domino's or something like that, right? If you tried to eat that whole pizza, you'd feel sick. Well, guess what? If you were to essentially give us all the information about your topic in one speech, that would also make your audience feel sick, right? So instead, I want you to take 2 pieces out of your pizza pie, or essentially take 2 main points out of this gigantic topic you have and just talk about those 2 things, because you only have 5 to 7 minutes. But more importantly, I want you to learn how to pick valuable information and not just the first information that comes up on Google. All right, so what is actually the definition? Well, you want to break down a huge topic into 2 smaller but related main points, and that's exactly what I'm going to be teaching you how to do in this speech. Now, when I say smaller but related, essentially what I mean is the quickest path between 2 destinations is a straight line, right? So you really want to be linear in your thinking, okay? Now that we understand main point B, how does that connect with main point, or excuse me, sorry. Now that we understand main point A, how does that connect to main point B? You want it to be succession. You want it to make sense. You want your audience to know exactly where you're going. All right, well, how do we do that? Well, that's where we get to question 3. I know, where did question 2 go? I don't know what I was thinking when I was making your course back. For some reason, I went right from question 1 to question 3. Before we get started, I want you to know that out of these 3 formats discussed below, you're only going to choose one, and that's really based on who you think you want to talk to. Now, one of the things that I should outline to you right now is that you're not going to be talking officially to your college student peers. You're going to create a fictional audience, right? I want to mention that again. You're talking to a fictional audience, so it's really important that you think about who you might be talking to. And then based on who you're talking to, you'll choose one of these 3 formats. All right, so let's talk about the what and how. Now, before we get started, I want to tell you that it's really easy to just write like a couple words here, but I encourage you not to. 1, because it says you have to write in complete sentences, but 2, this is going to be really valuable information. So you don't have to write everything that's down here, but I want you to summarize this in a complete sentence to make sure you have all the useful information. All right, so a what and how organization, that means that main point A is what and main point B is how, is useful when you're talking to an audience that does not know enough about this topic, nor do they know how to apply it, okay? So when I think of a good example, the first thing that comes to mind is Christianity, right? We don't really know a whole lot about Christianity or how to actually apply it to our lives. So main point A might be talking about the major parts of Christianity or what your audience needs to do in order to then apply it in their life. And that's that logical, linear type of relationship I want your main point A and main point B to have. If you tell your audience about what something is, then the next question that's going to come out of their mouth probably is going to be, cool, how do I do that? Or how do I use this information? Now, I gave you an example of Christianity. You could think about power posing. Hey, what is power posing? Remember we talked about this before speech one, and I wanted to tell you the importance of doing power posing because that will help with your anxiety. Maybe it did for some, maybe it did for some, maybe it didn't for everyone. Someone said they tried it in the bathroom and it didn't work, so maybe we shouldn't do it in the bathroom. But anyway, your main point A, you talk about what power posing is, and the main point B, you tell us how to do it, okay? I like the example of Christianity because I think that that's a huge topic, and we could talk about a whole bunch of things about Christianity, but using a what and how, we're talking about what it is or the major facets of it, and then how we can actually apply it. All right, the next one is the why and how. Okay, so when is this useful? Well, I think it makes sense. It's useful when someone knows about the topic, but they don't know why it's maybe important to them, and they don't really know how to apply it in their lives. Okay, so when you think about why and how, it's really like helping your audience understand that something that maybe they know a lot about or they think they know a lot about, they don't actually know how it's affecting them. So I like to use the word effects here in terms of the why is really the effect, okay? So main point A is really why it's important, or like I just said, the effects it has in the audience's lives that the audience is not aware of, right? And so, you know, if you look at your example, for instance, your outline example in your course pack, you'll see there is an example using positive reinforcement. And the first main point talks about why regular forms of punishment don't really work with kids, but why you should use, or like why positive reinforcement actually might work better. And then the next point, obviously we can use positive reinforcement to help our children make better choices and not necessarily just do something because they know they're going to get punished for it. And so main point B again is the how. How do we actually use this? Now the example I had was procrastination. Obviously, you know, a lot of students, if you talk to a lot of students, they'll say, oh yeah, procrastination is great. I get my best ideas when I'm up against a wall. But the reality is actually no, your work is not very good if you do it last minute most of the time because you haven't had time to really think about it. You just kind of write your first ideas down and you think it's really good because you got it done, but it doesn't actually work. So if I was giving a speech on procrastination instead of positive reinforcement, sorry for the two examples. That might be confusing, but I just want to give you a lot of examples of different topics. If I was talking about procrastination, I would probably talk about why procrastination actually is bad, or why it might hinder you from achieving like good results in college. If my audience was college students, which they can't be. And then I would give you tips on how to overcome procrastination, main point B. So if you're starting to see a pattern here, there's always a how in main point B. However, some people might be like, hey, Adam, isn't this a persuasive speech? To be honest, it can be. But for the purpose of this class, let's not worry about that as much. All right, so then we got the how, and that's what I was getting at before, is that in those two patterns, you've got a how at the end, but now you've got a complete speech on application. So when is this useful? Well, I think it's pretty obvious, right? Your audience knows what the topic is, but they also know why it's important to them, but they don't really know how to do it. So you want to think about things like yoga or meditation. Like these are big topics that you probably can't necessarily cover how to do it in one main point. Now, a lot of people get confused and they're like, well, Adam, how do I do a how? Well, you want to think about demonstration speeches or demonstrative speeches. Remember how I was talking about using big words like repertoire, demonstrative. Use big words and people will think you're very intelligent. At least I think so. But anyway, sorry. Think like demonstrative speeches, right? Or how do we actually do something? What would be the first step involved? And so that would really be like your main point A. If we're talking about meditation or we're talking about yoga, what's that first step? Maybe there's a mental step that you need to do. Like you need to prepare yourself mentally. And then that second step, maybe you prepare yourself physically. Why am I talking like this? I don't know. I'm trying to keep your attention. But if you think about a how as kind of like a step one, step two, then it makes it a little bit easier. So if you have like if you think that your speech would work really well using two main points talking about how, then you would kind of break it up into two different steps. And so maybe it's physically and mentally. Maybe it's like, this is the first step. This is the second step. It doesn't work for every speech. It really depends on the topic. Like for instance, Christianity wouldn't work really all that well with this. Like 2 ways to use Christianity in your life. They'd be like, I'd have to think about that. Well, one way could maybe be like to love more. Another way could maybe, see, it would be kind of hard. I'm doing this on the fly. I'm not sure. The example that I have here, of course, is exercise. And let's face it, right? With exercise, I mean, there's just so much information about exercising. So 2 ways that we can maybe incorporate exercise into our life. Maybe there's aerobic and anaerobic, or maybe there's like, there's a lot of different ways that you could break this up. But the point I'm trying to make is it doesn't work for every speech. All right, so do you notice there's no what, or there's no why, or what, why, or even a pro-con speech? Well, the reality is that without application, your audience is like, cool, I have all this information. What do I do with it now? And the other thing is, too, like with a pro-con speech, when you take a positive and you add a negative, guess what you have? You have zero. So you can't be like, hey, here are the benefits of exercise. Now here are the drawbacks. Because then we're left with like, well, what are we supposed to do with that, right? So you want to make sure that you follow one of those three patterns. And I'm going to go through and kind of talk about how this might work. So this is my example. I'm just showing you what this is going to look like. So don't copy this down. You need to actually do your own, picking a topic, of course, that you're passionate about. So again, just kind of, I'm going to go through this kind of quickly. And I'm going to kind of explain this, but you really need to choose a topic and look at these different formats and see how it's going to look in each pattern. The goal is for you to decide, one, which one makes the most sense, and then two, which one can you actually, get research for. And so you choose which pattern is going to work best. The reality is there's no right or wrong answer. It's just figuring out, who your audience is, what you think is going to work best, and then if you can find research for it. So I am going to be talking about mindsets, okay? And so if my topic is mindsets, what would this look like in a what, how? Well, in a what, how, your main point is what, or two important things your audience needs to know about this topic. Why are they two important things your audience needs to know about the topic? Well, these are called your subpoints, okay? And so in every main point, you're going to have two subpoints. And this always confuses students. They're like, wait, I'm confused. But if you think about it, the reason why we have you split this up into two subpoints for every main point is so that you're giving us more information. Now, in your last speech, you only had one main point and there were no subpoints, and it was basically like you're looking at one area. But now I want you to break it up into two subpoints. So it's not just one thing that your audience should know about this topic. It's actually two things. So what does my audience need to know about mindsets? Well, there are two types of mindsets, and mindsets are learned behaviors, okay? So these are two important things you need to know about mindsets. There is a fixed mindset and there's a growth mindset, and they're actually learned behaviors. Oh, cool. So if I'm an educator, I'm like, how do I use this? Well, one way to use this is praising effort. That's one way to change a mindset from a fixed to a growth. Another way is to teach intelligence as a muscle. That's another way. Okay, so you see now that I've learned about the mindsets, and I know there are two mindsets and that they're learned behaviors, now I'm starting to wonder, that's very interesting. So how do I use this information? Well, let's say my audience knew what mindsets were, but they didn't know why they were actually important. Well, I might say that students with a fixed mindset don't put as much effort into their work, and students with a fixed mindset will actually cheat to avoid looking stupid, especially to their instructors. And so what's cool about this is now my audience, if they know what mindsets are, but they don't know why it's important to them, again, I'm talking to educators, then they're going to be like, oh, that actually engages me. Wow, I can totally see students cheating so they don't look stupid. Okay, how do I use that information? Well, guess what? I already have it, praising effort and teaching intelligence. And so what's cool about the why, how, and the what, how is a lot of times the how is going to be the same, right? It's just debating whether or not you're telling them about what the topic is or why it's significant to them. Now, what if you have a how? Well, guess what? In this case, what I'm going to do is expand upon these two hows. And so my first how, I'm going to talk about how I praise effort. So one way to praise effort is provide feedback that recognizes the work that's put into an assignment. And then I can also provide check-in points for the learner. I love that this notification comes up. Sorry about that. All right. Then I can take the second subpoint, I can turn it into another main point, which is teaching intelligence as a muscle. So how do we do this? Well, we can introduce mindsets at the beginning of the year, or we can test students on their mindset through the year to see if they're changing. So what's cool about that is if you've got a speech where you're like, oh wow, these two subpoints in the how could actually be two different main points, like there's a lot of information here, then we can turn it into a how. But if you feel like, no, it's really important that we keep the what or we keep the why, then that would make sense that you only have one how in the application. But essentially, you're just answering these questions, and those are your subpoints. And so then when you go to write your subpoint, all you're doing is just essentially telling us what we're going to find in the subpoints. All right, so I know this is going to be a little bit different than what you're used to, but you want to choose a topic, obviously, that you're passionate about. It has application, and you want to make sure that you can do research on it as well. And it's not those generic, simple, annoying Com 101 speeches that we've all heard before. So I really encourage you to pick a big topic that you think is really exciting, that you're really passionate about, and fill this in before you come to class. Then in class, we'll talk about, which one sounds the best? And then in the next prep, we'll talk about outlining so we can figure out, how to kind of move forward, and then we'll choose our audience. And so we'll actually tailor our audience to the information that we're sharing. So a lot of you are going to be like, Adam, I can't think of a good topic. Don't Google topics. That's the worst thing you can do. You can watch the TED Talks in Blackboard, you can check the news, or you can download the app, which is called Flipboard. And what's cool about Flipboard is it really gets all the, it organizes news into different topics and things that you might be interested in. All right, so have fun with this. Do the best you can. I know you're going to be confused, but still fill out that sheet. Probably do it in pencil, so that if you make a mistake, you can fix it. And I look forward to seeing you in class. Talk to you soon. Bye.